Hello and welcome again, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tal Eisner. I'm Product Marketing Manager for Threat Prevention here in Checkpoint. Welcome this evening, this afternoon, to our session about endpoint security. We've titled the session about endpoints at the edge, stakes keep rising. We will conceal in this session some insights about our endpoint security offering, SandBlast Agent, how to reduce cybersecurity risks with 5 best practices. With me in the session, our moderator, Miss Simi Sharma, and also leading this session will be Yossi Hasson, our product manager for endpoint security. He will lead the session and provide you with great insights about the subject. Yossi, please take it away.
Thank you, Tal, and thank you all the audience that actually gathered here to listen to this webinar. One important logistics before I start. Any questions, you can actually submit them in the Q&A panel, and we will try to answer them either during the session or right after it in the Q&A part of that session. So, as Tal mentioned, my name is Yossi Hasson. I'm the product manager for endpoint security in Checkpoint, and I want to talk to you today about how to reduce cybersecurity risks with 5 best practices that you can actually utilize and leverage using SandBlast Agent. So what do we have on the agenda for today? 4 main topics. The first one is a bit of an overview about why we think that endpoints today are the weakest link in your infrastructures, in your enterprises, and why we think they should be actually the strongest defense. The second point is around those 5 best practices for endpoint security that we convened here to talk about. This is the main part of our session. In the third part of our session, we'll talk about a new kind of flexibility that we provide with a new cloud management capability that is actually being launched next week, and about many other new technologies and innovations in the product. And we'll finish by talking very briefly about how a SandBlast Agent is packaged and bundled, and how customers can actually choose which package is the most relevant for them if they want to purchase and use the solution. So let's start and talk about why endpoints are the weakest link. And let's start with a small analogy. So what's common between all of those elements that we see here? Kids, pedestrians, motorcyclists, endpoints. So I know we can't answer that. It's a webinar. You can maybe write what you think in the chat panel or in the Q&A. Or I can just tell you what we think is common between all of those elements. So kids, of course, they are very vulnerable members of our society. We need to actually treat them carefully, make sure they grow up as they should. Pedestrians are very fragile users of our city streets. We need to make sure we also take precautions when driving to make sure that they're not being hit, and so on. Motorcyclists are also very unguarded users of our roads. And it continues, of course, to many other elements. And lastly, endpoints. Endpoints are the weakest link in our network when it comes to cybersecurity. And we'll tell how and why in a moment. So what's common between all of those? They are very vulnerable, they're very fragile, they're very unguarded, and they're very weak. And that's the situation today with endpoints. They're vulnerable, they're fragile, they're unguarded, and they're weak. And why they are actually so weak? So 3 main reasons that endpoints are so weak today. First, most of the endpoints are actually beyond the perimeter. They are not inside the perimeter most of the time. They are traveling outside at coffee shops, at airports, and so on, and they're actually not protected by the enormous amount of protections that you actually deployed inside the perimeter with your firewall gateways, IPS, sandboxes devices, and so on. Also, endpoints are a very sophisticated creature that actually requires updates and patches to be secured all of the time. I don't know a lot of companies that actually update and patch their endpoints in a timely manner that they should. And the third point, which is one of the most frustrating points, is actually that endpoints are used by humans. And unfortunately, humans are very prone to errors and mistakes. And humans will do mistake. They will hit the wrong links and they will run the wrong files, and they could pose a challenge and a risk to our cybersecurity strategy because they use the endpoints. And not unsurprisingly, IDC says that 70% of the successful breaches originate from endpoints. Let's see a few attack examples of those. So we see here examples from the last 6 to 9 months. The first one talks about an event that happened at the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. And actually, they halted printing newspapers for a day because of a ransomware called Ryuk that caused major server outages. That was triggered by actually an illegitimate remote access tool that was running on vulnerable endpoint. Then another story about a large US medical device company that actually their intellectual property got leaked and sold. How did that happen? Some kind of a Trojan disguised as a software key generator that actually exfiltrated this sensitive data. This Trojan actually bursted after an employee tried to crack a protected digital book on, surprise, surprise, a vulnerable endpoint that was not protected by any security. And the last example here is a financial services company that actually lost all its customer data in a wiper attack. In this case, it was a Neshta wiper malware that managed to systematically destroy systems and wipe data. Here again, it was caused by an attempt to use some illegitimate tools to elevate privileges on a vulnerable endpoint. So those are just 3 examples, but there are many more, all started from vulnerable endpoints. But we do think that endpoints, when they are actually treated correctly, can be the strongest link or even the strongest defense in your organization. And why is that? So here again, 3 main reasons. First, endpoints have the very unique capability to provide very deep level and detailed forensics and behavioral visibility. That is something that we cannot achieve in other places in the network, not to the extent of an endpoint. And that gives a lot of insight that can be leveraged in order to detect attacks and, of course, to protect against them. The second point here is that endpoints by nature has very strong on-device enforcement capabilities. So a lot of attacks and events that are being tracked or detected on the network cannot actually be blocked on the network side. You have to be on the endpoint themselves to enforce a blockage, a remediation, a prevention of those attacks. And the third point, which is also very important, is the fact that on the endpoint, you have very good user interaction. That means that you can actually interact with the user and ask him about things that happens on the network, if they are malicious, if they are benign. Was it something that he did by intention, or maybe this is something that some malicious process did? And that can help to improve the catch rate and the false positive in a great way. And of course, the bottom line here is that we think that customers should leverage endpoints to better protect their infrastructure. And let's see how. So let's cover the 5 best practices for stronger endpoint security as Check Point sees it. So it's a nice wheel of best practices, starting from one of the best practices that is often overlooked, but is a very important capability that actually not all or even not most of the endpoint security vendors has. That is a capability or the best practice to reduce attack surface. You want to make sure that your devices are as least as possible exposed to attacks, and you want to actually reduce the open attack surface, and we'll see how to do it. The second best practice is prevention before the malware runs. So being able to actually detect and prevent the malware in the pre-execution phase and even before it even gets to the endpoint. The third best practice is to actually deploy runtime protections. And runtime protections are mainly behavioral analysis capabilities that are able to actually detect and inspect what managed to evade the second best practice. It's based on behavioral analysis. Then the fourth best practice is containment and remediation. So just detecting the attack and runtime based on its behavior is not enough. If we find that this behavior is malicious, we want to make sure we actually stop this behavior, we contain it in order that it will not laterally move to other devices, and we want to also remediate the infection and make sure the device comes back to its original status. and everything gets clear again. And the last, and maybe one of the most important best practices, is to understand and respond to all of the context of attacks that are happening in your organization. And we'll see the details about how SandBlast Agent helps organizations to understand and respond to the different attacks that are happening on their networks. So let's start with the first best practice, how to reduce the attack surface. So here we talk about three main elements that we think that every customer should do. First, control. Control what? Control the peripherals that are connected to the endpoint, control the applications that are running on the endpoint, and control data in motion, data that is flowing inside and outside of the endpoint. The second point here is encryption. We want to make sure the data is encrypted. So if it's being stolen or eavesdropped, no important data is stolen. And here we talk about two different kinds of encryption: encryption of data in motion and encryption of data at rest on your drive at use by files that you are actually using. And the third point here is enforcement. So everything that we talk about now and later is worthless if we cannot enforce and make sure that it's actually this is actually the policy that is running on the endpoint itself. So SandBlast Agent in that regard actually provides multiple capabilities that help you achieve those targets. So port protection helps you control peripherals, application control helps you control applications that are running on the endpoint, endpoint firewall controls data in motion. In terms of encryption, we provide remote access IPsec and SSL VPN capabilities for data in motion. And we also provide full disk encryption, removable media encryption, and file-based encryption, what we call document security or capsule docs, to actually encrypt data at rest and use. And last and not least, endpoint compliance capability is also an integral part of SandBlast Agent that helps you make sure that all of the features that we're talking about right now and we'll talk about later are actually running on the endpoints and being enforced. I want to focus on one important capability that we actually added in our last version in the beginning of June, which is native encryption management capability. That allows actually our clients to unify their endpoint security controls to a single management. And what we saw is that many of our customers decided to use either OS Mac File Vault or Windows BitLocker as their favorite full disk encryption solution. Why? Because it comes with the operating system and they find it easy to use. However, when they start using it, they understand that it's pretty complex to manage, control, and monitor it based on the management tools that are provided as a part of the operating system. It also causes the management tools proliferation. So there are many different kinds of management tools that should be used. So what we actually decided to add is a capability to actually manage those encryption capabilities from the endpoint management server. And then that provides benefits that all encryption technologies are actually managed from one console, and you have single consistent policy across all OSs, single monitoring pane for all different endpoints. So the File Vault support we had actually almost for a year now, and the BitLocker capability is a new one that we actually added just now. The next point here is prevention before the attack runs, and let's see the main things that we want to make sure customers are doing in terms of prevention before the attack is running. So the first one and the most trivial one is to block known attacks, right? That's the easy part. That's the one that most of the endpoint security solutions are doing, and they're doing it pretty well, mostly based on signatures. The second point is prevention of unknown attacks. And that's a bit more challenging, right? That takes a lot of innovation and new technologies to actually detect those unknown attacks and prevent also those, and we'll talk about how we do it. The third point is exploits and how we thwart those exploits and make sure they do not hit us, they are not used in attacks. And the last point is inhibiting user mistakes. So that's the third time that I'm actually mentioning users, and here we'll see how we can actually help to make sure that if users are doing mistakes, that will not hurt you, or we actually protect them against their own mistakes. So when we talk about how SandBlast Agent provides a solution for all of those, so we do have actually capabilities for each of those requirements. Endpoint anti-malware and reputation helps block known attacks. Pre-execution static and dynamic analysis, those are capabilities that prevent the unknown attacks. Anti-exploit is a capability to actually prevent exploits. And we are very happy to tell you that, by the way, anti-exploit was the first solution in the industry to protect against the vulnerability that is called BlueKeep, which was disclosed about a month ago. So whoever is interested, we have in our blog.checkpoint.com, a specific blog post about that and a video that explains exactly how we actually managed to stop a POC of an exploit that is using that vulnerability, the BlueKeep vulnerability. And of course, zero phishing, the last feature here, that helps you to inhibit user mistakes, and we'll talk about it. So let's talk a bit of the details about how we prevent unknown attacks before they run. So traditionally, we provided an online capability to prevent unknown threats. That's what you see here on the left. And the capability basically talked about the fact that every new file or every new document that is being downloaded or written to the file system is being sent to a remote location for threat emulation. That takes a minute or two. And then also to threat, or actually not then, in parallel, also to threat extraction that extracts any potentially malicious objects from the file and provides a sanitized, risk-free version of the file in seconds. So that proved to be a very efficient way to actually prevent unknown attacks. However, as you see, it takes some time, it takes minutes or seconds, and it needs reliance on a remote resource. What we actually added about 3 months ago is a capability that is actually that provides machine learning-based static analysis. And what's important on that capability is that it's local. It runs on the machine itself. And actually, it feeds from a machine learning-based static model that we're actually building in the back end in Checkpoint Labs based upon thousands or millions even of samples, either benign and malicious samples, that helps us build this static model. This static model is then being placed approximately once a month, updated once a month to the endpoint, on the endpoint itself. And once we see a file, a document on the endpoint, we can actually instantly inspect that file against this machine learning-based static model on the device itself, on the machine itself, without the need to rely on anything in the cloud, anything on-premise. And that process takes milliseconds, does not need constant updates or connectivity. It can happen completely on the machine. Let's talk about anti-exploit and how it helps us to better secure the endpoints and prevent attacks before they run. So anti-exploitation is the best way to demonstrate how we actually prevent attacks before they're running. And for that, you have to understand the cycle here. So the cycle of an attack, or the flow of an attack. So an attack tries to leverage a vulnerability by using an exploit. Once this exploit is being used, the shellcode is the attack tries to run a shellcode to download the malware and to run it. Anti-exploit actually plays in the exploit phase and tries to actually prevent the malware from even being downloaded to the endpoint and then being executed. So the malware phase can be detected by behavioral-based capabilities, but the exploit phase can be detected only by anti-exploit. So we protect against many different exploitation techniques, such as ROP, import-export tables, against VBScript God mode, against stack pivoting, and also against BlueKeep we talked about earlier. Which applications do we protect? So basically, a lot of different applications, and you can add and customize more. Browsers, Microsoft Office applications, Adobe Acrobat Reader, Adobe Flash Player, and much more. And again, we're very happy to say that we were the first with that capability to protect against the BlueKeep vulnerability. Let's talk about zero phishing and how it helps to inhibit user mistakes. So today there are two main features or capabilities for zero phishing, and there is another one coming up very soon. The first one is blocking phishing sites. That's what we see here. So this capability actually helps us, or helps our customers, to inspect every website that is accessed by their users in real time on access, and to actually try to get to a verdict if this website is a deceptive website that is part of a phishing campaign. And we'll talk about the details in the next slide. The second point here, provides credentials reuse prevention, or actually corporate credentials reuse prevention. It makes sure that employees or users do not use the same password that they use for their corporate resources and websites, also for external untrusted websites. And the third point is detecting compromised passwords. So that's a roadmap item coming later in 2019. And the idea here is that we're actually we're collecting information from the dark web about passwords that are already being compromised. Millions of passwords out there that are compromised. And we are alerting users and admins when a user actually chooses or uses a password that we know that is compromised, and it shouldn't use that password. Let's talk about zero phishing in the details for a moment, and I want to show you the experience, how it looks like from the user perspective. So in this example, the user gets an email from Microsoft, supposedly from Microsoft, that tells him that his Microsoft Outlook web account has recently been subject to security modifications, and it asks him to click here to go to the reset password page. So a classical phishing email that leads the users to a phishing website once they click the link. And here you see a website that looks exactly like Office 365. Once the focus is being changed to the input field, to the text field, SandBlast Agent actually starts to run the scanning. And very quickly, it finds out that this is a phishing site, and it actually blocks the text field from inputting any text. How does it do it? It doesn't look only at reputation. Reputation is good for detecting phishing attacks, but it's certainly not enough, because phishing attacks tends to stay there for maybe an hour or two, maybe a little bit more, and it's certainly not enough for the vendors to build the right reputation database. So we're actually looking at a lot of other indicators, much more interesting indicators, such as URL similarities, title similarities, visual similarities, and many others that helps us to understand if this is a deceptive website. In this case, the verdict was that this is actually a zero-day phishing site, and what the user will see is that a view over here, actually a tab in the browser that tells him to beware that it is a deceptive site, and all of the input is blocked. Third best practice, runtime protection, behavior protection, one of the most emerging kinds of technologies that we see in endpoint security today. And we'll start with a grocery list of what are the different runtime protection capabilities that we believe every customer, every company should leverage and use on their endpoints. So the first one is to detect signs of ransomware activities by the behavior of the endpoint itself. The second one is uncovering running mutations of known malware, and we'll talk about this in details. The third point is to discover unknown malware behaviors. The fourth is around fileless attacks and how we want to expose them. The fifth is about tracking evasion signs to reveal evasive malware. And the last one is about preventing cache credentials scraping. That helps actually attackers laterally move from endpoint to endpoint and create more damage. So SandBlast Agent, as you can imagine, has solution capabilities for each of those requirements. And we'll talk about some of them in details, and we'll cover them in the next few slides. In general, anti-ransomware is a solution that provides protection against ransomware. Behavioral Guard is a set of capabilities that are able to detect mutations of known malware, to actually detect completely unknown malware behaviors, and also fileless attacks. Anti-evasion, we'll talk about in details later, helps you to track evasion signs, and anti-mimi, or anti-mimikatz with its full name, helps to prevent cache credentials scraping. That's a roadmap item coming up later this year. So let's talk about Behavioral Guard for a moment. Behavioral Guard, and specifically the malware families capability of Behavioral Guard, helps classify and detect malwares to their families. And that actually built on the fact that most new malwares that we see today in the wild are mutations of known malware. The majority, actually, of malwares are mutation of known malwares. SBA forensics capability actually records and creates full forensics-based process execution tree. So that's actually the processes, the execution trees that you see here on the right side. So each of them are different mutation of the Cerber ransomware. We'll talk about it in a moment. So that capability helps also isolate a minimal common forensics execution tree that is similar between all the mutations of the same malware, of the same family of malwares. And that helps us to very uniquely classify and detect every mutation of a known malware family. So let's look at the example of Cerber here. Cerber is a very infamous ransomware that we see here just 4 mutations out of the about 70 that it has on the wild. And as we see that in all of the different process execution trees, there is one thing in common: this flow here between this executable between those 2 executables, that one is creating the other one, and there is a very clear relationship between those 2 executables that is always the same in all of the instances of Cerber. And that helps us to actually detect that there are all mutations of the same malware, and that provides for us and for our customers robust detection that spans malware evolution over time. Let's talk about another behavioral guard feature, which we call fileless malware protection, and that's our actually anti-fileless capability. So that's another capability we actually launched a few months ago that helps to protect against those fileless attacks. But what are fileless malware? What are fileless attacks? So basically, there are malicious scripts that are injected to standard system processes, such as PowerShell, and they are being run usually with very high admin privileges, and very challenging to actually detect those kinds of fileless malware-based attacks. And actually, hackers really like those fileless malware. Why? Because they're very powerful. They can do anything. They get they have full system privileges, and they're usually very, very persistent. And also, they're very undetectable by conventional security. They actually use no malicious processes and use no malicious files, and it's very hard to detect them. So Checkpoint provides actually additional protections for fileless malware. So we provide deep PowerShell hooks to understand exactly what the PowerShell is executing. We provide code deobfuscation analysis of the script itself. We actually scan all of the script arguments to understand better what the script is doing. And we can also do a holistic system behavioral analysis to understand the context of this script. This helps us to automatically terminate and remediate the attack and provide a very detailed forensics insight and visualization for the attack. And that helps us, of course, to prevent zero-day fileless malware. The next step in behavioral guard, and I'll go over it quickly, is artificial intelligence-based or machine learning-based behavioral analysis for running malware. And like any other AI-based solution, there are 2 phases to the solution. The first one is the training of the behavioral model, the machine learning-based model, that happens based on based on millions of different samples of both malicious and benign behavior patterns. And those are extracted for specific discrete behaviors that are then being classified into legitimate, suspicious, or malicious behaviors. Based on those, we're actually building a very extensive machine learning-based behavioral model. This behavioral model is actually placed on the endpoint itself. That's the second phase, right? And when we observe any kind of behavioral flow, we can very quickly inspect and detect this flow on the endpoint itself without a need to rely on anything else. And that's, again, a roadmap item coming very soon during 2019. Let's talk about another very interesting capability called anti-evasion. And that actually helps us to leverage the power of the malware against itself. And here we need to understand that many kinds of malwares are actually trying to evade detection in very unique and sophisticated ways. Why do they do it? They want to make sure that they are not detected by sandboxes, and the malware itself is actually being sent to its target device and then being run on there. So what they do is that they actually do some checks before they run. They check if they're, to find out if they're in a sandbox environment. They check for a debugger, they check if they're in a VM, they check if the clock is tempered, and some other checks here. And if they get to an understanding that they are not in a sandbox environment, they say to themselves, well, great, all clear, let's run. So SandBlast Agent actually leverages those evasion attempts. We monitor and record all of the evasion checks. We calculate the confidence of each of those evasions, and then we terminate the malware if a specific threshold is exceeds. And that helps us actually prevent or provide another layer of prevention to evasive attacks. So basically, we tell them those attacks you can run, but you cannot hide, we'll catch you. So that's another new capability that was added pretty recently. The fourth layer, containment and remediation. One of the most important ones, because it's not enough to just detect. Detection by itself is important, but you also need to make sure you contain the attack, you block it, you stop it, and you remediate any damages that was done as a part of the attack. And here we talk about a few different capabilities. In terms of containing the attacks and controlling damages, we want to detect and block command and control traffic. We want to also prevent lateral movement by isolating infected machines. In terms of remediation and sterilization, we want to actually help customers restore encrypted files, quarantine malicious files, and kill processes that are involved in the attack, and also sterilize the full attack chain and not only the last indicator of the attack. And here again, SandBlast Agent comes to the rescue with a lot of specific capabilities that helps to solve all of those requirements. And we'll talk about two of them in the next two slides. So I wanted to cover anti-ransomware to a bit more details than we talked before. So what's unique about Checkpoint's anti-ransomware capability within SandBlast Agent is that it is very effectively helps restore encrypted files if any files were encrypted during the detection or the monitoring process of trying to find out that that was a ransomware. So an ongoing anti-ransomware actually runs behavior analysis feature and constantly monitors for ransomware-specific behaviors, and there are many different behaviors that we can associate to ransomware. And then upon detection, it actually can very quickly analyze by initiating forensic analysis on all of the raw forensics data to understand the full attack details. And then also based on this analysis, it can quarantine and stop all the elements of the attack. But that's not enough if some of the files were already encrypted in this process. So another thing that anti-ransomware does is actually it creates continuously data snapshots and file backups of every file before it is being changed. Just before something is trying to change the file, we are taking a snapshot of the file, and then if we find out, if we detect that the ransomware was involved and that was the reason that the file was changed or encrypted, we can very easily restore all of those encrypted files from the snapshots. So that's a very unique remediation capability, which is very important for our customers. The second point here is the sterilization of full attack chain. And that's something that is also very unique to our solution. So what we see is that modern attacks are very persistent and they are multi-stage. The diagram that you see here in the bottom tries to demonstrate how a typical attack looks like. So in the left side, you see the point of the attack start, and in the right side, you see the detection trigger that actually was triggered the detection by the traditional antivirus capability or endpoint security that you have. And in the middle, there are a lot of different stages, different things that this attack is doing. It modifies registry entries, it creates more processes, more files, creates network processes, network connections, and so on. What we see is that most solutions are actually remediating only the detection trigger. Only the thing that actually triggered the detection itself will be remediated. And that means that the attack will come back, because one of the things that happens during those phases is persistence. So something changed in the registry that helps the attack be persistent and actually activate itself again after a reboot, after some time, and so on. So what SandBlast Agent helps you with is actually complete attack sterilization, or what we also tend to call sometimes full attack chain remediation. So we don't only remediate the detection trigger itself, we also track back all of the elements that were part of the attack, and we actually remediate all of those different elements. We kill them, we delete them, we remove them, we quarantine them, and so on. And that helps us to provide a full infection sterilization. Let's talk about the last layer here, understanding and responding to attack. Another very important capability, actually the two last layers together, we can call them, or maybe even the three last layers together, they are important part in EDR solutions, endpoint detection and response, and that's our answer to those kinds of solutions. So in terms of understanding and respond, we recommend our customers to have 4 capabilities. The first one is to be able to quickly triage events, to understand which events are more important, to handle what is different priority. We want to provide customers ability to understand the full attack context of the event that happened. We want to also help customers to immune other attack surfaces by sharing detection and IOCs and IOAs from the endpoint to other surfaces that are relevant. And last, and very importantly, we want to help customers what we call detect the undetected. So by actively hunting the threats based on searching through the forensics data, we can help customers to detect things that we weren't able to detect as a part of the solution. And all of those requirements also have relevant SandBlast Agent capabilities, and we'll actually cover 2 of them in the next 2 slides. Let's talk about quickly triaging events, or understanding what's the attack status and what's our total organization infection or status or posture status. And what we see here is the screen from Smart Event, in this case from the Smart Web view of Smart Event, that shows specifically the cyber attack view from the endpoint perspective. It shows the hosts that are under attack. It shows all of the attacks that are involved that we've seen in the last defined time, whether they're active, dormant, and so on. And if we focus, or actually if we zoom in on the hosts under attack part here, we see that we split the different hosts to 4 different statuses. And that really helps you to very quickly triage those events. The first status that you see is active. That means that we actually managed to detect that there was an attack on those endpoints, but we actually failed to prevent or clean this attack, which means that is the first priority for you. That's a machine with a running attack. You have to look at this machine very closely and understand what you can do to stop the further infection to spread or create more damage. The second point here is dormant attacks. So those are attacks that, again, we couldn't clean, but we know that they are not doing any damage right now. The third one, is endpoints that we actually cleaned from an attack. So the attack was running on the endpoint, but we managed to very quickly detect that it is a malicious attack, and we cleaned and remediated the attack. And the fourth one is the one that you like the most, and actually we like also the most, is the hosts that we know that we blocked attacks on those hosts. So we actually managed to block the attack before it even ran. And that, of course, helps you prioritize how you handle the different attacks and different endpoints. But when you want to actually look deeper at each of the attacks that happened in your endpoints, you want to have a look at the forensics report, at the full event forensics report. And for that purpose, we actually revamped the event forensics report in the last few versions that we released. So if that was the old forensics report, the new one, that you'll see right now, looks much more engaging. First of all, much more colorful, much more graphical, and gives much better insight and information and details to the admin, to the security analyst, than the older one. But what are the different insights that someone can have from actually reading through this forensics report? So the first one is some general information about this attack. What is the status? Clean, dormant, active, and so on. What is the malware family that was detected? And what is the severity of the attack? That helps you triage the event. What is the attack type? If it was a ransomware, infostealer, miner, and so on, you will get a clear classification over here. Was it a real attack? So we'll get information about which suspicious activity we saw that helped us to incriminate this attack. What was the damage? What was the business impact? How many files were encrypted? How many files were deleted? How many files were exfiltrated? So on. What are the main elements of the attack? Malicious connections, processes, and so on. And did we manage to clean all of the different connections, processes, and so on? And did we manage to remediate all of the damage that you've seen here in the business impact section. Now, the next point here is what is the entry point of the attack? How did it get in? So in this example, you see that it's a PowerShell origin, so that is probably a fileless attack. In other cases, you'll see web browsers that a file was downloaded from and so on. And the last and one of the most important ones is the full attack flow. So the full process execution tree that you can drill into and get much more details than the only details that you see here. So that's kind of a report which is very easy to consume, yet has a lot of very detailed information, which is very important to your security analyst to understand the full context of the attack on your endpoints. So that actually sums up the 5 layers that we talked about reducing attack surface, about the pre-execution prevention, about the runtime protection, containment and remediation, and understanding and response to attacks. But what I want to actually show here is to actually open each of the layers and show the breadth of capabilities that we actually have in each of the layers and the options that you can, features and options that you can use and leverage to better protect your endpoints based on those 5 best practices that we talked about. We won't go again over all of the details here, but you will get those slides and you'll be able to actually use them to check how your current security strategy, endpoint security strategy, works against those capabilities that we just described and are shown here. So that's it with the 5 best practices. Let's talk a little bit about flexibility with the new cloud management that we're actually launching next week, and some other interesting points that I want to cover with you today. So we're very excited actually to launch next week another option for endpoint security management. So if up until now the only way to manage Check Point's endpoint security solution, SandBlast Agent, was an on-premise server that you needed to install in your data center, and from that, manage the policy, monitor the logs, deploy the endpoint, and so on. From next week, that could be a fully cloud-based service that is fully managed and maintained and updated by Check Point. So no need for our customers to deploy any server on-premise, no need to upgrade it, and so on. Just a few clicks, and you have actually a management service running in the cloud from which you can manage all of your endpoint security strategy very easily. So that's a new capability. EA is already right now, and GA coming next week. In terms of the benefits of that, so very clear, right? So it improves the operational efficiency in a great way, provides rapid deployment. You can actually deploy an endpoint security strategy within an hour, provides you an elastic growth. You don't have to commit to number of endpoints that you want to manage. You can grow from 10 to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000 very quickly. And the solution is always up to date with the newest features and the most important bug fixes that you might want to have. In terms of the rapid setup, so let's see the 2 very easy things that you need to do to set up that. So the first step is to actually create an account on the Infinity portal. And then the second stage is to actually just open your smart endpoint console, connect it with the right name of a service to the cloud management service, and that's it. And you're ready to go. You can start working exactly as you can work today with your on-premise capability. Smart Event is included here, so no need to buy an additional license. And for those of you that are asking, what, really, Smart Endpoint Console? What about Web UI? So yes, that's coming soon. We're working right now on the Web UI that will allow you to actually configure the solution and monitor it from any browser, from any device. And that will be available probably in the end of this year or very early in 2020. A few frequently asked questions about endpoint cloud management. So what's the price of endpoint cloud management? So I'm happy to announce that cloud management is included with the endpoint seats that you purchase. No need to actually purchase another license. It is going to be a basic capability in all of our endpoint security services. Where is the cloud management hosted? So either in the US and in Europe, we have 2 centers, and the assignment is being automatically to the cloud instance, which is closest to the customer location. Is it available for evaluation or POC? Of course, that's very easy to evaluate and to try. We provide a free 30-day evaluation for SBA and, of course, for the cloud management capability of that. Can you migrate from an on-premise management to the cloud? So yes, if you're a Checkpoint user that want to migrate your on-premise management solution to the cloud, you can do it. However, at this stage, the migration involves a manual reassigning of all endpoints to the new management. We are working on an automated migration process that will be available later on, hopefully this year. Last question here, is there a limit to the number of endpoints that connect to a single cloud tenant? So theoretically, yes. Today we support up to 10,000 endpoints out of the box. However, if you have a need for a larger deployment, if this is possible and we'll do it happily, it will just require some manual tweaks from our side in the backend, in the cloud backend. So please approach your Checkpoint partner or account team, and they will approach our R&D to work on those specific cases. Let's talk a bit about the SandBlast Agent's wide platform support. So traditionally, we supported Windows operating systems, both workstation and servers, and we constantly update the support based on the new Redstone updates. We also added support from Mac in 2018, and we actually enhanced it this year in 2019 with more and more features. And we're looking to have full feature parity with the Windows version in 2020. We also added a very interesting support for Chromebooks, and that is a part of the solution that is mainly targeted for schools. We call it SandBlast for Education. Very relevant for schools in North America that provide Chromebooks to their students. The next slide will give more details about that capability. And a very exciting addition to our platform support is VMware. So VMware VDI is also supported currently for persistent virtual desktops, but very close, very soon also for non-persistent virtual desktops in Q4 19. Those of you who are using Citrix as their VDI platform will have to wait until 2020. Then we'll have support also for Citrix-based VDIs. Let's talk a bit about SandBlast for Education. So that's our very unique solution that helps school districts control and protect their students, their pupils that are using the Chromebooks that are provided by the school district. It provides 2 main capabilities: ability to content control that students are consuming using those Chromebooks based on things like URL filtering and safe search enforcement, and also very uniquely anti-bullying, anti-cyberbullying. And the other capability is cybersecurity features around phishing prevention, password reuse prevention, and things like threat extraction that are also part of the solution. The solution, by the way, is actually a browser extension that runs on Chrome browsers on Chromebook devices. One other important thing to mention about SandBlast Agent and Checkpoint's endpoint strategy. So SandBlast Agent is a core part of Checkpoint's Infinity holistic solution. Endpoint is one of the centerfolds of this strategy, and around it, we have also support the best security for data center, cloud, network, and mobile. All of the different surfaces, all of the different solutions share real-time threat prevention technologies. They share consolidated management. They share threat intelligence. And at the end of the day, we believe that they provide the best security. Last point here is about packaging and bundling. So for those of you that I managed to convince to show a bit more interest in the solution, I want you to understand what is the packaging of the solution. So we actually simplified the packaging of SandBlast Agent. Instead of 8 or 9 different packages that we had until now, we currently have 4 simple packages. The first one you see on the left is the SandBlast Agent data protection, which focuses on full disk encryption and media encryption capabilities. And the 3 other packages, basic, advanced, and complete, are focused on threat prevention capabilities in different levels. As you see, for all of the packages, access control and port protection capabilities, so features like endpoint firewall, application control, endpoint compliance, remote access are available in all of the features. All of the basic threat prevention capabilities, which are actually not so basic, starting from anti-malware, but also anti-ransomware and behavior guards and zero phishing, and our EDR capabilities are also included in all of the different threat prevention packages. The threat emulation and extraction capability is included only in the SBA Advanced and SBA Complete package. SBA Basic comes without the threat emulation and threat extraction capability. And to remind you, those are the remote unknowns and zero-day detection and prevention capabilities. And if you really want to have the full feature set of all of our endpoint security solutions, you want to get the SBA Complete, which includes, on top of the threat prevention capabilities and access control, also the data protection capabilities. And as we said before, cloud management is included by default in all of those packages without any extra price. Another very exciting thing we're introducing today is a unified endpoint security bundle, actually 2 unified endpoint security bundles. And the idea here is that if you're a customer that is currently interested in SandBlast Agent, either advanced or complete packages, you are eligible to actually buy also our SandBlast mobile solution for half off, or 50% discount, and actually double the amount of your secure devices. So SandBlast Mobile is a leading mobile threat prevention solution that works for iOS and Android devices and has a lot of, I think, went through a lot of innovations lately. And essentially, you can actually fully protect both your employee devices for less than $4 a month. So let's summarize and then get to the questions and answers. So in summary, Check Point's endpoint security, or specifically SandBlast Agent, proved to be a successful solution. Today, we protect over 5,000 different organizations, most of them enterprise organizations, and in total, over 5 million endpoints of SandBlast Agent are deployed worldwide, and that number only keeps growing. In terms of third-party validations and analysts, so we see a lot of traction lately. NSS gave us the recommended status in their latest advanced endpoint protection test with 0 false positives and a lot of 100% block rates in different criteria. Forrester gave us the leader position in their Forrester Wave endpoint security suites, and AV-Test in their testing gave us the top product, grade with 17.5 possible points out of 18 possible points, with 100% protection and 0% false positives. So just to close the session before we get to the Q&A, so we really believe that with SandBlast Agent, endpoints should be and can be your strongest defense. And that based on those 3 capabilities, 3 main overarching capabilities that you see here. So very innovative threat prevention technologies that are covered throughout the session. Very insightful and detection response capabilities, such as the forensics and the anti-malware, encrypted file restoration, and other response capabilities. And in general, a very complete endpoint security solution that helps you unify multiple different agents and multiple different management tools to a single tool, or maybe not single, but much lower numbers of agents and management devices or management consoles. And one very important point that we must mention, that SandBlast Agent, like all of the other Check Point security products, is an integral part of Check Point's Infinity holistic security architecture. So that means that intelligence is shared throughout the different products, and management is also shared throughout different products, and monitoring is also shared throughout all of the products, mobile, cloud, endpoint, and network. That's it for now, and let's get to the questions in the few more minutes that we have. So I'll go quickly through the questions and see what I can answer. So Andre is asking a question about SSL and TLS visibility of the solution. So what I recommend for that question, Andre, is to approach your SE, your local checkpoint SE or checkpoint partner, and to get and to talk with him about that. You can also email me, and you see my email on the slide, and I will get the right technical resource that can help you with that question. Anonymous attendee asked if are we going to see a production dashboard and best practices for real world or only sales slides. So I've shown you some screenshots of production dashboards and some best practices. I hope that managed to fit your expectations, anonymous attendee. Let's see. Okay, so I see that King David Akubin is sharing with us some challenges that he had while implementing that solution. Although he had a pleasure of implementing the solution in enterprise environment, he had some challenges. King David, what I actually suggest is to, again, send me an email or open support tickets to our attack about those, and we will gladly help you to solve any of those issues. It's not something that we can cover right now in this call. Kelvin is asking, what about support for non-Windows endpoints? So that's a great question, Kelvin. We talked about the fact that we actually added Mac support in 2018, and we have actually extended it in 2019. We also support Chromebooks right now, and that's it in terms of non-Windows endpoints. If you have requests to support Linux, please let me know about those. I want to know about them, and we'll take them into consideration for our next release and for future priorities. Kelvin is also asking if hybrid element is important. So yeah, the roadmap is that we'll actually support both a cloud management and physical policy servers. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure right now if it's going to be supported in the GA phase or sometime later. So Kelvin, you're also invited to send me an email about that. I will check the details with our R&D, and I'll come back to you very soon. Kelvin is asking also if cloud manager is included for all editions for endpoint security. So yes, we answered that, I think maybe later in the presentation. So all of the packages that I talked about include also cloud management at no extra cost. Kadim needs to have a free 30-day evaluation. How do I get it for test and demonstration for customers? So Kadim, the best thing to do is actually approach your Checkpoint SE. And if you don't know who is your Checkpoint SE, please send me an email, and I will find the right SE that will be able to help you. Kelvin is asking if there is support for VDI on the roadmap. Actually, Verde VDI. I don't know what is Verde VDI. If you're referring to VMware VDI, so I talked about it. Yes, VMware VDI is supported. Currently only persistent VMware VDI, but very soon also non-persistent. Another anonymous attendee is asking, how does your product stack up against offerings from Silence, Carbon Black, and CrowdStrike? So it's a great question. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to cover that. Again, what I suggest is to either send me an email or to your local SE, and we'll make sure to address all of the different capabilities or functions that we think we are better at. Although all of those solutions that you just mentioned are very good endpoint security solutions, and we respect them. Have the Salvador is asking, have the certifications, and then I don't understand the question. Brad is asking if you can receive a PDF version. So yes, all of the attendees of this webinar will get both the recording and the presentation itself. So stay tuned to your email, Brad, and you will get it. Let's see the next question. Unitown PC asking if it's true that if SSL decryption and inspection is not fully and properly deployed, SandBlast will be largely ineffective against any HTTPS or SSL traffic. So this is not true. I repeat, this is not true. The fact that we are sitting on the endpoint itself and we're able to see the behavior of the endpoint, regardless of the network traffic and whether it is decrypted, encrypted or not, it gives us the ability to actually detect any kind of malware, even if the traffic of that was encrypted. Joanne saying that this was an awesome webinar. Thank you, Joanne. Next, Kelvin is asking me to kindly remind of my official job title and role. Kelvin, good question. So Kelvin, I'm a product manager in Checkpoint for endpoint security products. Anonymous attendee is asking when SandBlast Agent for Windows 10 version 1903 is going to be out. So I'm not sure about the numbering, but if you're referring to the latest Redstone update, I think it is already out. But I'll be happy to get an email from you and get back to you as soon as possible. Let's see else. Unitown PC is very excited about the new cloud management. For the SMB sector, what is the simplest and fastest way to purchase SandBlast with the new cloud management next week? So actually, once the solution will be GA'd and it will be announced most probably next week, any endpoint SKU will be eligible also for cloud management capabilities. So just purchase any of the endpoint SKUs, and in the first phase, in the first few months, I suggest to talk with your Checkpoint SC to understand how to use the cloud management capabilities, but later on will be even much easier to deploy. Kelvin is asking about Linux support. So actually, we have Linux support in our roadmap. We still don't have a very specific ETA for that, unfortunately. We're trying to explore what it means for us and what is the business opportunity around that. Kelvin, if you have a specific opportunity, I'll be very happy to learn about it, to both understand the size of the business associated with that, and also to understand your specific requirements in terms of support for Linux. King David wants to get those slides. You will get it. You will get them, King David, in a follow-up email. Let's see. Unitown PC is asking if SandBlast Agent for the PC can work harmoniously and simultaneously with other products such as Malwarebytes and Malwarebytes anti-malware. That's a great question, Unitown PC. Yes. So the anti-malware component of SandBlast Agent can be disabled. Can be disabled, and you can use actually another baseline anti-malware capability instead of it. And SandBlast Agent will provide the advanced security capabilities on top. So that's a good question. By the way, there is also very tight integrations between third-party anti-malwares and SandBlast Agent. And the best example for that is the forensics capability. Whenever a third-party antivirus actually detects an infection, the forensics event analysis can be triggered to provide a full forensics report about this event that was triggered by this third-party AV. So actually we have a few more questions and the time is over, but I can continue answering any questions if you have, but I suggest we'll stop posting any new questions. Tony is asking, how does the endpoint solution pair with SandBlast running on an appliance? It seems they overlap. Is it only beneficial for for laptops that may leave the office? So that's a very good question, Tony, and thank you for this question. So one of the things that is important in terms of endpoint security is to actually be able to monitor the behavior on the endpoint itself and to have detailed forensics data about the endpoint. That is something that you can never do. You can never do with a network, with SandBlast network, with SandBlast appliance that looks only at the traffic. So that's a very important point. Yes, SandBlast Agent provides a lot of additional value on top of the SandBlast appliance that is inspecting only the network traffic. Kadim is asking if it's possible to combine endpoint, SandBlast, and security gateway on the same management center. So yes, you can actually run on the same on-premise management server both your endpoint security strategy and your network security strategy. The management of the policy itself will be with different modules of Smart Center. You will manage a network policy from Smart Dashboard and the endpoint policy from Smart Endpoint. However, you will be able to see the logs and to monitor the reports and so on from a Smart Event or Smart View in a unified manner. Kelvin heard rumors of InfoSite acquisition. Can I comment? No. Actually, I didn't hear any rumor about that. If you have any details, I'll be happy to get also the rumors. Please send me an email. Thomas, is the license for the on-premise endpoint management included as well? Thomas, that's a good question. So the answer, unfortunately, is no. Cloud management will be included by default. It will be the recommended way to go for our customers. Customers that will require on-premise endpoint management will need to buy a license for that. Kelvin is asking about the memory footprint of SandBlast Agent per feature or if all features are turned on. So Kelvin, that's not an easy answer to give you right now. A lot of different parameters will affect that. Again, we'll be happy to get an email with that question and find the right engineer to help you with that. And Unitown PC is saying, excellent webinar, thank you so much. So thank you, Unitown PC, and thank you everyone for being on this call, for bearing with me for this, for those 70 minutes, 71 minutes already. I enjoyed it a lot. I hope you enjoyed it also. And again, my email is there on the slide. And for any other questions, comments, feedbacks, ideas, rumors, please let me know. And I'll try to find you the best answer in the shortest possible time. Thank you, everyone.